6 months ago, the police declared my son dead after his boat vanished during an offshore storm. His body was never found, but our entire family still held a memorial for him. Last night at 11:43 p.m., my head of security called, "Sir, your son's credit card was just used at a hotel." I drove 5 hours through the rain, praying this was nothing more than a cruel mistake. But when I opened the hotel room door, the man the world had already buried slowly turned to look at me. My dead son was still alive. "I'm so grateful you're here. To help us connect, could you share which city or country you're watching from? Also keep in mind, this narrative incorporates fictional elements for entertainment and educational value. Any similarity to actual names or locations is accidental, but the core lesson remains vital for you. Family secrets, cold betrayals, and the ultimate reckoning. This is Dad's silent revenge." The rain tapped against my office window like a nervous finger, each drop tracing a path down the glass as if trying to escape the gray sky. I sat in my worn leather chair, the one I'd kept since Margaret and I first moved into this house 40 years ago, and stared at the family photo on my desk. Margaret's smile, warm and unwavering, seemed to mock me from the past. She'd been gone 6 months, and the hollow ache in my chest hadn't dulled one bit. My phone buzzed on the desk, a harsh intrusion into the quiet. I glanced at the screen private number. No caller ID. Probably another telemarketer, I thought, letting it go to voicemail. But then it rang again, persistent. I sighed and answered. "Edward Harmon," I said, my voice rough from disuse. "Mr. Harmon, this is Marcus Cole. I'm the head of your security team." His voice was low, professional, but edged with something I couldn't place, urgency maybe. "Marcus, what's going on?" I asked, sitting up straighter. Marcus didn't call me unless there was a problem. He was ex-military, a man of few words, and he reported directly to me. "There's been an unauthorized transaction on your son's credit card, a substantial one, at a hotel in Galveston." I froze. "Vincent, but he's—" "I know, sir. That's why I'm calling. The card was used 3 hours ago. I've already dispatched a team to the location, but I thought you should know." My mind raced. Vincent had been missing for 6 months. We'd held a memorial, scattered his ashes at sea, ashes we'd never actually seen, just an urn we'd filled with sand from the beach because there was no body. The official story was that his fishing boat had gone down in a storm off the coast of Florida. No survivors. I had stood through a memorial with no body, no final goodbye, and grief had nearly swallowed me whole. But now, a credit card transaction in Galveston that was 5 hours away. "What hotel?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "The Grand Mariner, room 312. I'm sending you the address now." I ended the call and stood up, my legs shaky. The rain outside seemed to intensify, hammering against the windows. I looked at Margaret's photo again, her eyes seeming to follow me. "What's going on, Maggie?" I thought. "Is this some kind of sick joke?" I grabbed my coat and keys, my hands trembling. I didn't tell anyone where I was going, not Gerald Whitmore, my lawyer, not even my assistant. This felt like something I had to do alone. The drive to Galveston was a blur of wet highways and flashing headlights. My mind kept circling back to Vincent, my only son. The boy who'd loved boats before he loved girls, who'd taken apart engines just to see how they worked. The young man who'd taken over Harmon Maritime after college, turning it from a small family business into a thriving shipping company. The son who'd vanished without a trace. And now a credit card charge. It could be a mistake, I told myself. Identity theft. Someone had stolen his card after the memorial and was using it. But why Galveston? Why not somewhere closer? I arrived at the Grand Mariner as the sun was setting, the sky bruised purple and orange. The hotel was a sleek glass tower, the kind of place that charged $300 a night for a room with a view of the Gulf. I parked in the back, not wanting to be seen, and slipped inside through a side entrance. The lobby was all polished marble and soft jazz. I felt out of place in my wrinkled suit and rain-spattered coat. I took the elevator to the 3rd floor, my heart pounding so loud I could hear it in my ears. Room 312. I stopped in front of the door, listening. Silence. I knocked softly. No answer. I knocked again, louder. Still nothing. I hesitated, then pulled out my phone and called Marcus. "I'm at the hotel," I said quietly. "Room 312. No one's answering." "I'm pulling up the security feed now," Marcus replied. "Give me a minute." I waited, shifting my weight from foot to foot. The hallway was quiet, just the hum of the ice machine down the hall. After what felt like an eternity, Marcus came back on the line. The room was registered to a Diana Harmon, checked in 2 days ago. "There's no one inside now. The keycard hasn't been used in the last hour." Diana, my second wife. We'd married 2 years after Margaret's death, a whirlwind romance that had surprised everyone, including me. Diana was younger, vibrant, full of life, everything I thought I needed after years of loneliness. but things had been strained lately, distant. She'd been spending a lot of time in Galveston, she said, visiting a sick friend. I'd believed her. Why wouldn't I? I'm going in, I said, hanging up before Marcus could protest. I used my company access card. Harmon Maritime owned a security firm that had master keys to most hotels in the area, and slipped the card into the lock. The light turned green and I pushed the door open. The room was dark, the curtains drawn. I fumbled for the light switch and flipped it on. The first thing I noticed was the suitcases, 2 of them open on the bed, half packed. Women's clothes, expensive looking. A designer purse sat on the dresser, and next to it a laptop and a phone. And then I saw it. On the nightstand next to a half-empty glass of wine was a man's watch, a vintage Rolex, the one Vincent had worn every day since his grandfather gave it to him on his 18th birthday. I'd last seen it at his memorial, sitting on the altar next to his photo. My breath caught. I picked up the watch, my fingers brushing the cool metal. It felt heavy, real. This wasn't a mistake. I turned toward the bathroom, my gut twisting. The door was ajar and I pushed it open. That's when I saw him. He was lying in the bathtub, fully clothed, his eyes closed. For one horrifying second, I thought he was dead. Then he stirred, groaning, and opened his eyes. Dad, he mumbled, his voice thick with sleep or something else. It was Vincent. Older, harder around the edges, but unmistakably my son. He blinked up at me, confusion etched on his face. Vincent, I whispered, my voice breaking. Is it really you? He sat up slowly, wincing as if his head hurt. Yeah, it's me. What are you doing here? I didn't know what to say. I just stood there, the watch clutched in my hand, staring at the son I thought I'd lost forever. I could ask you the same thing, I finally managed. He ran a hand through his hair, his eyes darting around the room. I needed some time away. You know that. Time away. You've been gone 6 months. We had a memorial for you. I buried an empty urn. He flinched at that, his jaw tightening. I know, Dad. I'm sorry. It's complicated. Complicated. I took a step closer, my anger rising. You let us think you were dead. You let me grieve for my son. He stood up, then his movements unsteady. I didn't have a choice, okay? There were circumstances. What circumstances, Vincent? Tell me. He opened his mouth to respond, but before he could say another word, the door to the room burst open. Diana stood in the doorway, her face pale, her eyes wide with shock. She was holding a small overnight bag, and behind her stood a man I'd never seen before, tall, broad-shouldered, with a cold, hard stare. Edward, Diana's voice trembled. What are you doing here? I looked from her to Vincent, my mind reeling. I could ask you both the same thing. The stranger stepped forward, his hand resting on something under his jacket. I think it's time you left, Mr. Harmon. I tightened my grip on the watch, my heart pounding. This wasn't just a family reunion. This was a nightmare, and I had a feeling it was just getting started. The air in the hotel room felt suddenly thick, charged with a tension I could almost taste. Diana's eyes flicked from me to Vincent, her expression a mixture of fear and something else, guilt maybe. The stranger by the door didn't move, his hand still hidden under his jacket, but his gaze was locked on me, assessing dangerous. Edward, please, Diana said, her voice soft, pleading. Let's talk about this calmly. I let out a bitter laugh. Calmly. You've been lying to me for months, Diana. You told me you were visiting a sick friend in Galveston. You never mentioned you were staying in a hotel with my son. Vincent stepped between us, his hands raised slightly as if trying to defuse the situation. Dad, it's not what it looks like. Diana didn't know I was here, I swear. I stared at him, the son I thought I'd lost now standing before me like a stranger. Then what is it, Vincent? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you've been alive this whole time and chose to let us believe you were dead. He ran a hand through his hair, his eyes darting to the stranger by the door. I can't explain everything right now. It's not safe. Not safe. I took a step closer, my voice rising. You faked your own death. You let your mother believe you were gone. Do you have any idea what that did to her? Margaret's name hung in the air, heavy and painful. Vincent's face crumpled for a second, just a second before he hardened again. I know, okay, I know. But I had to. Oh. Had to what, Vincent? Tell me the truth. The stranger cleared his throat, and I turned to him, my anger boiling over. And who the hell are you? Diana finally spoke up, her voice trembling. Edward, this is Marcus Cole. He's a friend. Marcus. The name clicked in my head. Head of security. The man who'd called me about the credit card. But why was he here, and why did he look like he was ready to draw a weapon? I think it's time you left, Mr. Harmon, Marcus said again, his tone leaving no room for argument. I ignored him, my eyes fixed on Vincent. Is this because of the company? The money. What is it, Vincent? Vincent's jaw tightened, and for a moment I saw the boy I'd raised, the one who'd looked up to me, who'd wanted to follow in my footsteps. But then it was gone, replaced by something colder, harder. It's not about the money, Dad, he said quietly. It's about the truth. The truth about what? He hesitated, glancing at Diana, who wouldn't meet his eyes. About Margaret. The room seemed to tilt. What about Margaret? Vincent swallowed hard. She didn't die of natural causes, Dad. She was murdered. The words hit me like a physical blow. I staggered back, my hand gripping the edge of the dresser to steady myself. That's insane. She had a heart attack, the doctors said. The doctors were paid to say that Diana interrupted, her voice barely above a whisper. She finally looked at me, her eyes filled with tears. Edward. I'm so sorry. I didn't want to believe it either. I shook my head, my mind reeling. Believe what? That my wife was murdered by who Vincent is, this some kind of sick joke. Vincent's face was pale, his eyes haunted. It's not a joke, Dad. Margaret found out about the embezzlement. She was going to change her will to cut me out. I tried to stop her. The room fell silent, the weight of his words pressing down on me. I couldn't breathe, couldn't think. You killed her. I whispered the words, tasting like ash. Vincent didn't answer, but he didn't have to. The guilt in his eyes, the way he wouldn't meet my gaze, it was all the confirmation I needed. I felt the world spin, my vision blurring. I stumbled toward the door, my hand still clutching the watch. I had to get out of there. I had to escape this nightmare. But as I reached for the doorknob, Marcus stepped in front of me, blocking my way. I can't let you leave, Mr. Harmon. I turned to face him, my anger flaring again. Get out of my way. I'm sorry, sir, but I can't. You know too much. Too much about what I demanded, but before he could answer, the sound of a car door slamming outside caught my attention. I looked out the window and saw a black SUV pull up its headlights, cutting through the rain. Two men in dark suits got out, their movements quick and professional. They weren't police, they moved like Marcus did, like trained operatives. Who are they? I asked, my voice tight. Diana's face went pale. They're here for Vincent. They're going to take him away. Take him where I asked, but I already knew the answer. They weren't here to help. They were here to silence him. Vincent's eyes met mine, and for the first time since I'd walked into that room, I saw the fear in them. Dad, you have to go. Now, before they see you. I hesitated, torn between the need to protect my son and the need to understand what the hell was going on. But then I saw the men moving toward the hotel entrance, their hands under their jackets, and I knew I didn't have a choice. I slipped out of the room just as the door to the stairwell down the hall burst open. I ducked into the ice machine alcove, my heart pounding as I watched the men rush past, their eyes scanning the hallway. I waited until they were gone, then slipped out of the hotel through the same side entrance I'd come in. The rain had eased to a drizzle, but the night felt colder, darker. I stood by my car, my mind reeling. Margaret murdered, Vincent alive, Diana. What was her role in all this, and who were those men? I looked down at the watch in my hand, the one Vincent had worn every day. It was still warm from his touch. I didn't know what to believe anymore. But one thing was clear, my life would never be the same again. The rain had finally stopped, leaving the night air cool and clean as I drove back to Houston. My mind was a battlefield, every thought a weapon turned against itself. Vincent alive, Diana's betrayal, Margaret murdered. It couldn't be true. It couldn't. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white, the vintage Rolex digging into my palm. I'd slipped it into my coat pocket before I fled the hotel, a tangible piece of evidence that this nightmare was real. My son was alive, and he was a stranger. I needed answers, not from Vincent, not yet. I needed someone who understood the legal labyrinth of the Harmon Empire, someone who'd been with me since the beginning. Gerald Whitmore, family lawyer for 40 years. He'd handled my marriage to Margaret, my second marriage to Diana, every corporate merger, every will revision. If anyone could tell me what the hell was going on, it was Gerald. I pulled onto the interstate, the headlights cutting through the darkness. My phone felt heavy in my lap. I should call him. Now. But what would I say? Hey, Gerald, my dead son just showed up in Galveston and might have killed his mother. He'd think I'd lost my mind. But I had to try. For Margaret's sake, for my own sanity. I dialed his number, my heart pounding. It rang twice before his familiar, gravelly voice answered. Edward, it's nearly midnight. Is everything all right? I took a shaky breath. Gerald, I need to see you, right away. There was a pause, then the sound of papers shuffling. Of course, my office is always open. But this sounds serious. Is it about the company? The board meeting is tomorrow, you know. They're still pushing for that vote of no confidence. It's not about the board, I said, my voice tight. It's personal, very personal. All right, come over. I'll make coffee. I hung up and pressed the gas pedal harder. Gerald's office was in a sleek downtown high-rise, a fortress of mahogany and leather that smelled of old money and discretion. He was waiting for me at the door, his face etched with concern. Edward, what's going on? You look like you've seen a ghost. I stepped inside the familiar surroundings, doing nothing to calm the storm inside me. I whispered. Gerald, I need to ask you something, and you have to tell me the truth, no matter how crazy it sounds. He led me to the leather sofa, his eyes sharp. You know you can trust me. I took a deep breath and pulled the Rolex from my pocket. This belongs to Vincent. Gerald's eyes widened. Vincent, but I know. That's what we all thought. I told him everything, the credit card call from Marcus, the drive to Galveston, the hotel room, the suitcases, the watch, and then the part that made my throat tighten. He's alive, Gerald, and he said things about Margaret. Gerald's face paled. He took the watch from my hand, his fingers trembling slightly. Are you certain it's his? I'd know this watch anywhere. He never took it off. And what did he say about Margaret? Gerald's voice was barely above a whisper. I looked down at my hands. He said, she didn't die of natural causes, that she was murdered, that she was going to change her will to cut him out because he was embezzling money, and that he tried to stop her. The words hung in the air, monstrous and impossible. Gerald stared at me, his expression a mixture of horror and disbelief. Then he stood up and walked to his desk, opening a drawer and pulling out a thick file. Edward, he said slowly, I need to show you something. He spread the documents on the desk, legal papers, medical reports, insurance forms. After Margaret's death, there were irregularities. Nothing concrete, but enough to make me question the official cause. The autopsy report was rushed. The toxicology screen was incomplete. And there was this. He handed me a single sheet of paper. It was a copy of a will dated just 2 weeks before Margaret's death. But it wasn't the will I remembered. This one left the bulk of her estate not to me, not to Vincent, but to a charitable trust for marine conservation. And in the margins in her handwriting were notes: Vincent's behavior is concerning. I've discovered discrepancies in the company accounts. I must protect the legacy. My breath caught. She knew. She suspected Gerald corrected gently, and she was about to act on it. That's why I had my doubts. But without proof, I couldn't challenge the official ruling. Not then. I looked at the will, then at Gerald. You knew all this time you suspected Vincent might have... I didn't want to believe it, he admitted. But yes, there were signs. Small things, missing funds, altered records. Vincent was clever. He covered his tracks well. But Margaret, she was meticulous. She would have uncovered everything. A cold fury began to build inside me, slow and deadly. My son, my own flesh and blood. He'd let me grieve for 6 months. He'd let me believe he was dead. And all the while he'd been alive, plotting, stealing, and killing his own mother. Why didn't you tell me? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Gerald met my gaze, his eyes full of regret. Because I didn't have proof. Because I was trying to protect you. You were already drowning in grief. If I'd thrown this at you, I didn't think you could survive it. I sank back onto the sofa, the will trembling in my hands. Margaret's words, I must protect the legacy, echoed in my mind. She'd known. She'd been trying to protect us from Vincent, and he'd killed her for it. What do I do now? I asked the question, hanging in the silence. Gerald sat down beside me, his voice firm. Now we gather evidence. We find out exactly what Vincent has been doing. We prove what he did to Margaret, and then we take him down, legally, permanently. I looked at him, the first spark of resolve cutting through the fog of grief. How? First, we talked to Marcus Cole. He's your head of security, but he's also my contact inside the company. He's been feeding me information for months about the embezzlement, about Vincent's offshore accounts. He's the one who tipped me off about the will being accessed. My head snapped up. Marcus, but he was at the hotel. With Diana. Gerald nodded slowly. I know. And that worries me. But he's also the only one who can give us the hard evidence we need. We need to meet with him. Alone. I thought of the stranger in the hotel room, the cold look in his eyes. He's dangerous, Gerald. So is Vincent, Gerald replied. And so are the people he's working with. We're in deeper than I thought, Edward. This isn't just about family anymore. This is about power, money, and murder. And if we're not careful, we'll be next. I stood up, my legs shaky, but my mind made up. Then we be careful. We play this smart. We gather everything we can and we strike when the time is right. Gerald nodded, a grim smile touching his lips. I'll call Marcus. Set up a meeting, somewhere safe, somewhere private. I looked at the will again, Margaret's handwriting a stark reminder of what was at stake. Do it. And Gerald? He looked up. Yes. Thank you for protecting me, for protecting her legacy. He gave me a small, sad smile. Always, Edward, always. I left his office with a new sense of purpose. The grief was still there, a heavy weight in my chest, but it was joined now by something else, determination. I would find out the truth. I would expose Vincent. And I would make sure Margaret's legacy was protected no matter the cost. But as I drove home, the city lights blurring past, one question kept echoing in my mind. Who was Marcus Cole really, and whose side was he on? The first light of dawn slipped through the blinds, painting stripes across the cold marble floor of our kitchen. I stood there gripping a mug of coffee that had long gone cold, staring at the woman who had shared my bed for 2 years. Diana. Her robe was silk the color of cream, and it whispered as she moved, but the elegance felt like a costume, now a mask hiding something dark and ugly. "You were gone last night," I said, my voice flat. Again. She didn't jump. She never did. Just took a slow sip of her tea, her eyes fixed on the garden beyond the window. "I told you, Edward. Clara isn't doing well. It's a long drive to Galveston." Clara. The phantom sick friend. I'd checked. There was no Clara, no hospital records. No one named Clara had been admitted in the past 6 months. "How is she?" I asked, setting my mug down a little too hard. The same Diana murmured, finally turning to face me. Her face was a perfect oval of concern, but it didn't reach her eyes. "It's terminal. There's nothing more they can do." I studied her. The polished hair, the subtle makeup, the way she held her chin just so. This was the woman I'd fallen for, vibrant, attentive, a balm for the raw wound of Margaret's death. But now, every gesture felt calculated. "Diana." I said, my tone softening against my will. "We need to talk. About Vincent. About that hotel room. About why you were with him." Her mask slipped. Just for a heartbeat. The cup in her hand trembled, a tiny fracture in her composure. "Edward, I don't know what you think you saw, but it's not what it looks like." "It looks like my wife is lying to me," I said, the hurt sharpening my words. "It looks like you've been lying for months. You knew he was alive, didn't you?" She looked away, her gaze darting to the hallway as if expecting someone to appear. I suspected she whispered, but I had no proof, and I was terrified. I was. "Of Vincent?" I asked, stepping closer. "Of what he's capable of," she breathed, her voice cracking. "He's not the boy you remember, Edward. He's cold, calculated. He told me he needed my help, that he was in danger, that you were in danger. I thought I was protecting our family." "Our family." The words twisted in my gut, by letting me believe my son was dead, by watching me grieve for 6 months. Tears welled in her eyes, but they were careful, controlled. I couldn't find the words. "You were drowning. I thought if I had proof, if I understood what was happening, I could tell you gently. But Vincent, he's a spider. He wraps you in his web, and you can't escape." I thought of the watch in my pocket, heavy and accusing. "He killed Margaret, didn't he?" Diana flinched as if struck. I don't know. But I think he did. She found out about the money, Edward. The money he was stealing from the company. She was going to change her will to cut him out. And she knew about me. She knew I was involved. Involved? The word hung in the air, poisonous. "Were you involved in her death?" She flinched again, a full-body shudder. "No, never." But I was afraid, Edward. Afraid of what Vincent would do if I told anyone. Afraid of what you would do if you knew I'd been helping him. Before I could process that, my phone buzzed on the counter. A text from a number I didn't recognize. "We need to meet. Alone. It's about your son. MC. Marcus." Diana saw it. Her face went ashen. "Don't go," she pleaded, grabbing my arm. Her fingers were icy. "It's a trap. Vincent has people everywhere." "Or it's our only chance to get answers," I said, pulling my arm free. The need for truth was a physical ache sharper than any grief. "Let me go instead," she insisted, her voice rising. "Let me talk to him. I can find out what he wants." I hesitated. She looked genuinely terrified, but the Diana I thought I knew wouldn't be this desperate. "No," I said, my voice hardening. "This is my family, my mess. I'll handle it." I left her standing in the kitchen, her silk robe swirling around her, and drove to the park on the edge of town. The morning was crisp, the kind of clear, cold day that felt like a fresh start if you ignored the rot underneath. Marcus was already there, leaning against a tree in a worn leather jacket. He looked like he hadn't slept. "Mr. Harmon," he said, nodding. "Marcus," I replied, keeping my distance. "What's this about?" He fell into step beside me as I walked toward the pond. "I know you have questions. About Vincent. About Diana. About Margaret. I have more than questions." I said, my anger a low simmer. "I have a missing son, a murdered wife, and a security chief who shows up in a hotel room with my wife." Marcus ran a hand over his face. "I was following orders. Diana, she was scared. She thought Vincent would kill her if she tried to leave. She thought he'd kill you if you got too close." "And you," I asked, "whose side are you on?" He stopped and looked at me dead in the eye. "Yours, always yours. That's why I'm here." He told me everything, how he'd been feeding information to Gerald, how he'd discovered Vincent's embezzlement, how he'd tracked the offshore accounts. And then he told me the worst of it. Vincent wasn't just stealing money, Marcus said, his voice grim. He was planning to fake his own death. Not to escape danger, but to take everything. He and Diana, They were going to stage an accident. Make it look like you'd had a heart attack. After a respectful mourning period, Vincent would return the grieving son, the new CEO. And Diana, she would be his wife, his partner. The words landed like bullets. I felt the blood drain from my face. Diana knew about this. Marcus nodded. From the start, she married you for the company, Edward, for the money, and Vincent was her ticket. And Margaret, I asked, my throat tight. What about her? Marcus's jaw clenched. She was the only one who could stop them. She knew about the embezzlement. She was going to change her will to cut Vincent out. And she was going to expose Diana. So they got rid of her. They killed her, I whispered. I can't prove it, Marcus admitted, but I believe it. And I think Vincent did it himself. He had the access, the motive, and the coldness to pull it off. I sank onto a bench, the world tilting. The pieces were clicking into place, forming a picture so vile it made me sick. My son, my wife, conspiring to kill me to steal everything I'd built with Margaret. Why are you telling me this now? I asked, looking up at him. Because I couldn't stay silent anymore, Marcus said, his voice heavy with regret. Because you deserve the truth, and because I think we can stop them. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small encrypted flash drive. This has everything: bank records, emails, phone logs. Proof of Vincent and Diana's involvement. Proof of the embezzlement. Proof of the plan to stage your death. It's not enough to convict them in court, not yet. But it's a start. I took the drive, my fingers brushing his. It felt like a live wire. What do you want me to do with it? Give it to Gerald, Marcus said. Let him build a case, and when the time is right, we bring them down, together. I looked at the drive, then at Marcus. Why should I trust you? You were in that hotel room. You threatened me. Marcus's eyes dropped. I know, and I'm sorry. I was following orders. Diana, she's scared. She thinks Vincent will kill her if she tries to leave. She thinks he'll kill you if you get too close. And you, I asked again, whose side are you on? He met my gaze, his expression resolute. Yours, Mr. Harmon. Always yours. I stared at him, searching for any sign of deception. But all I saw was a man burdened by guilt trying to make amends. All right, I said finally, I'll give this to Gerald, but Marcus... He nodded. Yes. Stay away from my family, from Diana, from me, until we're ready to move. He gave me a small, grateful smile. Understood. I stood up the drive, burning a hole in my pocket. As I turned to leave, Marcus called my name. Edward, he said, his voice softer now. Be careful. Vincent isn't the only one you need to worry about. There are others. People with a lot to lose if the truth comes out. I looked back at him, the morning sun glinting off his sunglasses. Who? But he was already walking away, disappearing into the trees like a ghost. I stood there for a long moment, the drive heavy in my hand. The truth was out there, scattered in pieces. Vincent alive, Diana complicit, Margaret murdered. And now a conspiracy that reached far beyond my family. I had the evidence, I had Gerald, I had Marcus, for whatever that was worth. But as I got back in my car, one thought echoed in my mind. Was it already too late? The rain had stopped, but the chill in my bones remained. I sat in my car outside Gerald's office building, the flash drive Marcus had given me burning a hole in my pocket. It was heavier than it looked, weighted with secrets, with lies, with the shattered pieces of my family. I took a deep breath and stepped out into the cool morning air. The city was waking up, people rushing to work, oblivious to the storm raging inside me. I felt like a ghost among them, unseen and unheard. Gerald was already at his desk when I arrived, a pot of coffee steaming between us. His eyes were sharp, questioning. You have it, he said, not a question. I placed the small device on his desk. Marcus gave it to me. He said it has everything. Gerald picked it up, examining it as if it were a bomb. Everything. That's a big claim. He said it's proof of Vincent and Diana's plan, of the embezzlement, of Margaret's murder. Gerald's expression darkened. Let's see. He plugged the drive into his computer. The screen flickered to life, revealing folders labeled with cryptic names. Financials _2024 emails _V&D phone _records insurance _plot Margaret _notes. Where did Marcus get this? Gerald asked, his fingers flying over the keyboard. He didn't say. But he's been feeding you information for months, right? Maybe this is the culmination. Gerald nodded, his face grim. I've been getting bits and pieces from him, bank discrepancies, unusual transactions. But this is a treasure trove. Sure. He opened the first folder. Bank statements from offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands, transfers to shell companies, payments to unknown individuals. My head spun. Numbers I didn't understand, but the totals were staggering. This is Vincent's doing, Gerald said, pointing to a series of transfers. He's been siphoning money from Harmon Maritime for years, using these shell companies to launder it. I stared at the screen, trying to comprehend. My son, my own flesh and blood, had been stealing from us, from me. The betrayal cut deeper than I ever imagined. And Diana, I asked, my voice hoarse. Is she involved? Gerald opened the emails _V and D folder. There were dozens of messages between Vincent and Diana, some dating back months. The old man trusts me completely. He has no idea. Vincent, I can't keep doing this, Vincent. What if he finds out Diana? He won't. Not until it's too late. Then we'll be free. Vincent. The insurance policy is in place. If anything happens to him, we inherit everything. Diana, perfect. And if he becomes inconvenient, we have a backup plan. Vincent. I felt sick. They had planned for my death. Not just planned, they had taken out a life insurance policy on me. And a backup plan. What did that mean, murder? This is enough to put them away for a long time, Gerald said, his voice tight. But we need more. We need proof they actually intended to carry it out. And we need proof about Margaret. He opened the phone _records folder. Hundreds of calls, texts. One number appeared repeatedly, a burner phone, untraceable. But there were also calls to known associates of a man named Leo Santoro. A name I'd heard in whispers, a fixer, a man who made problems disappear. Who's Leo Santoro, I asked. Gerald's face paled. He's a consultant. Works with people who need things done. Off the books. You think he killed Margaret? I think it's possible. Look. Gerald pulled up a series of calls from 3 days before Margaret's death. Multiple calls between Vincent's phone and Santoro's burner. Then silence. After Margaret's death, a single call Vincent to Santoro lasting only a minute. Then a transfer of $50,000 to an offshore account. The pieces were falling into place, each one a shard of glass in my heart. Vincent had hired someone to kill his mother, my Maggie. We need to go to the police, Gerald said, standing up. This is enough for an arrest for both of them. I shook my head. Not yet. I need to understand why. I need to know if Diana was forced into this, if she's as much a victim as I am. Gerald sighed. Diana chose to marry you for your money, Edward. She chose to go along with Vincent's plan. That's not victimhood. That's greed. But she seemed scared. I insisted, remembering her trembling hands, her fearful eyes. She said Vincent would kill her if she tried to leave. Maybe, or maybe that's just what she wants you to believe. I ran a hand through my hair, frustration mounting. I need to talk to her, alone. That's a terrible idea, Gerald warned. She's dangerous. They both are. I have to know the truth, and I think she wants to tell me. Gerald studied me for a long moment. All right, but not alone. We'll set it up, we'll record it, and we'll have Marcus nearby just in case. I nodded, grateful. What about the others Marcus mentioned, people with a lot to lose? Who are they? Gerald opened the insurance _plot folder. There were emails not just between Vincent and Diana, but also with members of the Harmon Maritime board. Subtle discussions about succession planning, about Edward's declining health, about ensuring the company's future. They're not just planning to kill you, Gerald said, his voice grim. They're planning to take over the company, and they have allies on the board, people who stand to gain from your death. My mind reeled. The board people I'd known for years, trusted with my company, my legacy. Had they all betrayed me? Who, I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Gerald hesitated. I don't know for sure, but I've noticed some unusual voting patterns lately, some aggressive moves to undermine you. I can dig deeper. Do it! I said, a cold fury building inside me. Find out who's involved, and then we'll take them all down. Just then, Gerald's private line rang. He answered, listened for a moment, then handed the phone to me. It's for you, he said, his expression unreadable. A Mr. Kowalski. I froze. Kowalski. The name from the hotel. Ryan Kowalski. Vincent's best friend, the one whose death had supposedly been a boating accident. The one whose disappearance had been buried inside the same false report that declared my son dead. Hello, I said, my throat dry. Mr. Harmon, a gravelly voice said. I don't have much time. They're watching. Who is this? I asked, my heart pounding. A friend. Of your son. Of Margaret. The voice paused, then continued. You need to know the truth about Harmon Maritime. It's not just Vincent and Diana. It's bigger. Much bigger. There are people on the board who have been embezzling for years. Vincent found out. Margaret found out. And they were silenced. Who are you? I asked again. I'm someone who can help. But you have to be careful. They're listening. They know you have the flash drive. They'll stop at nothing to get it back. The line went dead. I stared at the phone, then at Gerald. Someone just warned me. About the board. About the flash drive. Gerald's face was pale. This is getting out of hand, Edward. We need to go to the FBI. Now. I shook my head, a strange calm settling over me. Not yet. I need to talk to Diana. I need to hear her side, and then we'll decide what to do. But as I left Gerald's office, the warning echoed in my mind. They're watching. They know you have the flash drive. They'll stop at nothing to get it back. I looked around, seeing the city with new eyes. Every shadow seemed menacing, every passerby a potential threat. The conspiracy was deeper than I'd imagined, and I was now a target. The next evening, I stood in front of my closet trying to decide what to wear. Not for a gala, not for a board meeting, but for a confrontation that could change everything. A simple suit, I decided. Nothing flashy. I wanted to look like a man going to dinner, not a man about to expose a murder plot. Diana was in the dining room setting the table. She'd invited me to a quiet dinner at home, just the two of us. A chance to talk, she'd said. A chance to heal. I knew better. This was my idea, my condition for not going to the police yet. I wanted her alone, without Vincent, without Marcus, without any interference. I descended the stairs, the click of my shoes echoing in the silent hallway. Diana looked up as I entered, a small smile on her lips. She was wearing a simple black dress, her hair pulled back. She looked beautiful. She looked like the woman I'd married. "Edward," she said, her voice soft. "You came." "I did," I replied, taking a seat at the head of the table. "I thought we could talk, like we used to." She poured me a glass of wine, a rich Cabernet, my favorite. I'd like that. We made small talk as we ate. About the weather, about the garden, about the upcoming charity ball. It was surreal. Here we were discussing mundane things while the truth sat between us like a loaded gun. Finally, I set my fork down. "Diana, I know about the flash drive." She froze her fork halfway to her mouth. "What flash drive?" "The one Marcus gave me, the one with all the evidence, the bank records, the emails, the phone logs, the plans to kill me, the insurance policy." Her face went pale, but she didn't deny it. "Edward, I can explain." "Please," I said, leaning forward, "explain." She took a deep breath, her eyes glistening. "It started after Margaret died. Vincent came to me distraught. He said he'd made mistakes, that he'd stolen money from the company, that he was in trouble. He said he needed my help to cover it up. He said if I loved you, I'd help him protect you from the fallout." "So you helped him embezzle more money?" I asked, my voice cold. "I didn't know what else to do," she whispered. "He threatened me. He said if I told anyone, he'd ruin you. He'd ruin the company. And then he started talking about getting rid of you. He said it was the only way to keep everything. To keep me. And you went along with it." She nodded, tears streaming down her face. "At first I thought he was bluffing, but then he started making arrangements. He hired someone, Leo Santoro. He said it would look like an accident, a heart attack, and then he said we could be together, that you'd want me to be happy." I stared at her, the woman I'd loved, the woman I'd trusted with everything. "And the insurance policy." "Vincent took it out. Said it was for estate planning. I didn't know it was meant to benefit us after you were gone." "And Margaret?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "What about her?" Diana's face crumpled. "I didn't know about that. Not until after. Vincent told me she'd found out about the embezzlement, that she was going to change her will to cut him out. He said she'd leave everything to some charity. He said we'd lose everything. So he killed her." I said, the words tasting like ash. She nodded, sobbing. "I didn't know he was going to do it. I swear, Edward, I thought he was just going to scare her to make her keep quiet. But then she died, and he told me it was an accident, that she'd had a heart attack. I believed him. I was so stupid." I stood up, pacing the room. The betrayal was a physical pain, a knife twisting in my gut. But underneath the anger, there was a sliver of pity. She had been manipulated, used by Vincent. But she had also chosen to stay, to go along with his plans. "Why didn't you come to me?" I asked, stopping in front of her. "Why didn't you tell me the truth?" "Because I was scared," she said, looking up at me with red-rimmed eyes. "Scared of Vincent. Scared of losing you. Scared of what you'd think of me." I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to. But the evidence was clear. She had participated in the conspiracy, whether willingly or under duress. "I need you to tell me everything," I said, my voice firm. "About Vincent, about the board, about Leo Santoro, every detail." She nodded eagerly. "I will. I'll tell you everything I know. Just promise me you'll protect me. Promise me you won't let Vincent hurt me." Before I could answer, the front door burst open. 3 men stormed into the dining room, all wearing dark clothes and carrying guns. They moved with military precision, spreading out to cover the room. "Where is it?" one of them demanded, a tall man with a scar across his cheek. Diana screamed, cowering in her chair. I stood my ground, trying to appear calm. "Where is what?" "The flash drive," the man snarled. "We know you have it. Hand it over and no one gets hurt." I felt a surge of adrenaline. They were here for the evidence, for the proof of their crimes. "I don't have it," I lied, my voice steady. "It's at my lawyer's office." The man laughed, a cold, humorless sound. "We searched your house, we searched your office. It's not there. You have it on you." He stepped closer, his gun trained on my chest. "Now hand it over, old man, before I decide to take it from your corpse." Suddenly a shot rang out. One of the men dropped, clutching his leg. Marcus Cole appeared in the doorway, a gun in his hand, his expression cold and determined. "I don't think so," Marcus said, his voice calm. The two remaining men turned their guns on Marcus. A firefight erupted. I grabbed Diana and pulled her to the floor, shielding her with my body. Bullets shattered the windows, splintered the furniture. I heard Marcus return fire, then a cry of pain. When the shooting stopped, the room was silent except for the sound of our ragged breathing. Marcus stood over the two downed men, his gun still raised. "Are you all right?" he asked, not taking his eyes off them. I nodded, helping Diana to her feet. She was shaking uncontrollably, her face pale as death. "What the hell is going on?" I demanded, my voice shaking. Marcus kicked one of the men's guns away. "They're with Leo Santoro. They came for the flash drive, for the evidence." "How did they find us?" I asked, looking at Diana. Her eyes widened in terror. "Vincent, he must have tracked my phone. He knows I'm here." Just then the front door opened again. Vincent stood there, a smug smile on his face, a gun in his hand. Behind him stood two more men, also armed. "Hello, Father," he said, his voice dripping with contempt. "I see you've met my associates." Diana let out a sob. "Vincent, please, don't do this." He ignored her, his eyes fixed on me. "Hand over the flash drive, Dad, and maybe I'll let you live." I looked at the gun in his hand, at the men surrounding us, at Diana's terrified face. I knew I was outnumbered, but I also knew I had the evidence, and I knew the truth. "I don't have it," I said, my voice steady. "It's already with the police." Vincent's smile faltered. "Liar." "It's true," Marcus said, stepping forward. "I sent a copy to the FBI this morning. They're on their way." Vincent's face darkened. "Then you're all dead anyway." He raised his gun, aiming at me, but before he could pull the trigger, Diana threw herself in front of me. "No," she screamed. "Vincent, don't!" He hesitated, his gun wavering. In that split second, Marcus fired. Vincent cried out, dropping his gun, clutching his shoulder. Blood seeped through his fingers. The two men behind him turned and fled, leaving their wounded boss behind. Vincent fell to his knees, gasping in pain. "Diana, how could you?" She knelt beside him, a tear streaming down her face. "I'm sorry, Vincent. I'm so sorry. I never wanted this." He looked up at her, his eyes filled with betrayal. "You betrayed me. You betrayed everything. You betrayed yourself," she whispered. Vincent's eyes fluttered closed. He was still breathing, but barely. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder. Marcus lowered his gun. "The police are here, and an ambulance." I looked at Diana, at the blood on her hands, at the tears on her face. She had saved my life, but at what cost? "It's over," I said, my voice breaking. She nodded, then slumped against me, unconscious. The room spun, the reality of what had happened crashing down on me. My son, my wife, my life, all shattered. But as I held Diana's limp body, I knew one thing for certain: the fight was far from over. The conspiracy went deeper, and I was just beginning to uncover it. The rain had turned the night into a blur of red and blue lights. Sirens wailed, tires screeched, and the air was thick with the smell of gunpowder and rain. I sat on the curb, my hands cuffed behind my back, staring at the chaos unfolding before me. Diana was on a stretcher, an oxygen mask over her face, her skin pale as death. Vincent was being loaded into another ambulance, a tourniquet tied around his shoulder. Marcus stood nearby, talking to a detective, his expression unreadable. "Mr. Harmon," a detective said, approaching me. He was middle-aged, with a tired face and a badge that read Detective Miller. "Can you tell me what happened here tonight?" I took a deep breath, trying to steady my voice. "I was having dinner with my wife. These men, 5 of them, broke in. They were looking for something, a flash drive." Miller raised an eyebrow. "A flash drive? What was on it?" "Proof," I said, my voice hardening. "Proof that my son and my wife were planning to kill me. Proof that they embezzled millions from my company. Proof that they murdered my first wife." Miller's eyes widened. He exchanged a glance with the uniformed officer beside him. "That's a serious allegation, Mr. Harmon." "It's the truth," I said, nodding toward the stretcher where Diana lay. "She told me everything. Vincent forced her into it. He threatened her. He threatened me." Miller nodded, making notes. "We'll need to take your statement, and we'll need to secure this property. It's a crime scene." "What about my wife?" I asked, my voice cracking. "Is she going to be okay?" "She's lost a lot of blood," Miller said, his tone softening. "But she's stable. She'll survive." I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. Diana would live, but at what cost? She had betrayed me, conspired against me, but in the end she had saved my life. The irony was not lost on me. "What about Vincent?" I asked. Miller shook his head. "He's in surgery. The bullet nicked an artery. He might not make it." A strange feeling washed over me, relief, sadness, I wasn't sure. Vincent was my son, my flesh and blood, but he had tried to kill me. He had killed Margaret. The thought of him dying brought no joy, only a hollow emptiness. "I need to see Gerald," I said, standing up. "My lawyer, he needs to be here." Miller hesitated, then nodded. "All right, but you're not going anywhere until we get your statement." I sat back down, my mind racing. The flash drive. Where was it I had given it to Gerald earlier that day? Had he secured it, or was it still in my house? "Detective," I said, turning to Miller. "The flash drive. It's not here. It's at my lawyer's office. Gerald Whitmore. He has it." Miller's eyes narrowed. "We'll need to verify that, and we'll need to search this house." "Search all you want," I said, waving a hand. "But you won't find it here. I don't have it." Miller nodded to the officer, who began cordoning off the area. I watched as the paramedics loaded Diana into the ambulance. She caught my eye through the window and mouthed the words, "I'm sorry." I nodded, not knowing what else to do. The next few hours were a blur of questions, statements, and paperwork. Detective Miller was thorough, but I could tell he was skeptical. Who could blame him? A wealthy businessman accusing his wife and son of murder. It sounded like a bad movie. But then Gerald arrived, his face pale with worry. He talked to Miller in hushed tones, showing him the flash drive. Miller's skepticism turned to shock as he scrolled through the documents. This is a lot," Miller said, looking up at me. "You weren't kidding." "I never joke about things like this," I replied. Miller nodded. "We'll need to bring in Vincent as soon as he's stable, and we'll need to question your wife." "Diana's a victim," I said, my voice firm. "Vincent forced her into this." Maybe Miller said, not convinced, but she still participated. She still conspired to kill you. I didn't argue. He was right. Diana had made her choices, but I couldn't shake the feeling that she had been as much a pawn as I had. As the night wore on, more police arrived. They searched the house, finding the bodies of the two men Marcus had killed. They also found evidence linking them to Leo Santoro weapons burner phone's cache. Miller came back to me, his expression grim. "We have enough to charge Vincent with attempted murder, conspiracy, and embezzlement, and we have enough to charge your wife with conspiracy. But Santoro, he's a ghost. We'll need more to bring him down." I nodded, exhaustion weighing on me. "What about the board? The people on the flash drive, the ones who were helping Vincent?" Miller's eyes narrowed. "The board? What are you talking about?" I explained what Marcus had told me about the board members who were embezzling money, about the succession planning, about the people who stood to gain from my death. Miller listened, his face darkening. "If this is true, it's bigger than we thought. We'll need to investigate every member of that board." "Do it," I said, my voice cold. "I want every one of them behind bars." Miller nodded, then hesitated. "Mr. Harmon, I need to ask you something. That warning you mentioned, the one from the anonymous caller, do you think it's connected?" I thought about the voice on the phone they're watching. They know you have the flash drive. "I don't know," I admitted. "But I think it's safe to say that whoever is behind this doesn't want the truth to come out." Miller's expression hardened. "Then we'll just have to make sure it does." As dawn approached, I sat in Gerald's office sipping a cup of coffee that had long gone cold. The adrenaline had worn off, leaving me drained. Gerald leaned back in his chair, his face etched with concern. "Edward, this is far from over. Vincent is still alive. Diana is under investigation. And now we have a conspiracy that reaches the highest levels of your company." I nodded, my mind racing. "What's the next step?" "We need to secure the flash drive," Gerald said. "And we need to start building a case against the board members. But we have to be careful. If there are people on the inside, they'll know we're coming." "What about Marcus?" I asked. "Can we trust him?" Gerald hesitated. "Marcus has been with us for years. He's saved my life more than once. But after tonight, I don't know, he killed 2 men in your living room. That's not something you forget." I thought about the firefight, the way Marcus had moved with lethal precision. He had saved us, but at what cost? "I need to talk to him," I said, standing up. "Alone?" Gerald nodded. "Be careful, Edward. If there's a conspiracy, Marcus could be a part of it." I found Marcus in the waiting room of the hospital, his leg bandaged, his face pale. He looked up as I entered, his eyes tired but alert. "Edward," he said, his voice rough, "I'm sorry, I didn't mean for any of this to happen." "What happened tonight?" I asked, my voice cold. "Who were those men?" Marcus hesitated, then sighed. "They were with Leo Santoro. He's a problem solver. He handles things for people who don't want to get their hands dirty." "And Vincent hired him to kill Margaret?" I asked. Marcus nodded. "And to kill you. He was supposed to make it look like an accident, a heart attack. But when that didn't work, he sent those men to get the flash drive, to silence you." "And the board?" I asked. "What about them?" Marcus's expression darkened. "They're involved. Some of them, anyway. They've been embezzling for years. Vincent found out, Margaret found out, and they were silenced." I stared at him, the weight of his words settling on me. Who else is involved? Marcus shook his head. "I don't know, not yet, but I'm working on it." I studied him, trying to read the man who had been my head of security for years. Could I trust him? He had saved my life tonight. But he had also been working with Diana, feeding her information. Was he truly on my side, or was he playing both sides? "Why should I trust you?" I asked, my voice low. Marcus met my gaze, his eyes steady. Because I owe you. Because I failed you. Because I didn't see what was happening until it was almost too late. I held his gaze for a long moment, then nodded. All right. But you're on probation. One wrong move and I'll hand you over to the police myself. Marcus nodded, a small smile touching his lips. Understood. As I left the hospital, the first light of dawn was breaking. The city was waking up, but for me, the nightmare was just beginning. The conspiracy was deeper than I'd imagined, and I was running out of time. The next morning, I sat in Gerald's office, surrounded by stacks of documents, bank records, and emails. The flash drive had revealed a web of corruption that stretched far beyond Vincent and Diana. It was a conspiracy that reached the highest levels of Harmon Maritime. Gerald leaned over the desk, pointing to a series of transactions. These transfers, they're not just from Vincent, they're from board members, Robert Ellsworth, Charles Pennington, even Margaret's closest ally, Susan Holloway. I stared at the names, my stomach twisting. Susan. She was Margaret's best friend. She wouldn't. She would, Gerald said, his voice grim. And she did. Look at these emails. They're discussing how to handle Margaret after she found out about the embezzlement. They were planning to force her out to make her sign over her shares. I felt sick. Susan. I had known her for years. She had been at Margaret's funeral, had cried at her graveside, and all along she had been part of the conspiracy. What about the others? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Ellsworth and Pennington have been siphoning money for years, Gerald said, pointing to more documents. They set up shell companies just like Vincent did, and they used Harmon Maritime's funds to finance their lifestyles. I ran a hand through my hair trying to process it all. My company, my legacy. It was all built on a foundation of lies and theft. What do we do? I asked. Gerald leaned back, his expression thoughtful. We need to confront them, but we have to be smart. If they know we're onto them, they'll destroy the evidence, or worse. What are you suggesting? A board meeting? Gerald said, a small smile touching his lips. Tomorrow afternoon, we'll present the evidence, we'll force them to resign, and we'll hand everything over to the FBI. I stared at him. You want to confront them directly? After everything that's happened, they tried to kill me, Gerald. They're not going to just roll over. I know, Gerald said, his voice calm. But we have the flash drive. We have Marcus. And we have the element of surprise. They won't be expecting us to fight back. I hesitated, then nodded. All right, let's do it. The next day, I stood in the conference room of Harmon Maritime, surrounded by the board members. They were all there. Robert Ellsworth, Charles Pennington, Susan Holloway, and the others. They looked at me with a mixture of curiosity and disdain. Edward, Susan said, her voice smooth as silk. It's been a while. How are you holding up? I didn't answer. I simply placed the flash drive on the table and pushed it toward her. What's this? She asked, picking it up. The truth. I said, my voice cold. Everything. The embezzlement, the conspiracy, the murder of my wife. The room fell silent. All eyes were on the flash drive. Susan's expression didn't change. She simply smiled and set the drive down. Edward. I don't know what you think you found, but this is ridiculous. We're a corporation. We have disagreements, that's all. Is that so? I asked, pulling out my phone. Then explain this. I played the recording, Diana's confession, Vincent's threats, the phone calls with Leo Santoro. The room was dead silent. Susan's smile faltered. Where did you get this? From my wife, I said, my voice hard. She told me everything. About the embezzlement, about the plan to kill me, about Margaret's murder. Charles Pennington stood up, his face red with anger. This is a setup. You faked this to take control of the company. Is it? I asked, pulling out more documents. Then explain these bank records, the transfers to your shell companies, the payments to Santoro. Pennington paled, sitting back down. Robert Ellsworth, ever the smooth talker, leaned forward. Edward, listen to me. This is a family matter. It doesn't concern the board. Let's handle this privately. It concerns all of you, I said, my voice rising. You were all involved. You all benefited from Margaret's death. You all tried to kill me. Susan stood up, her voice calm but firm. Edward, you're upset. You're not thinking clearly. Let's take a step back. We can work this out. There's nothing to work out, I said, my voice cold. You're all resigning, effective immediately, and then you're going to the police. The room erupted in protests, but I didn't listen. I had the evidence. I had the power. And I wasn't afraid anymore. As the board members filed out, defeated, Gerald leaned over and whispered, "You did it." I nodded, but I didn't feel victorious. I felt empty. The people I had trusted, the people I had worked with for years, they had betrayed me. And for what money power? As I left the conference room, my phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. "You've made a powerful enemy, Edward. This isn't over." I stared at the message, a chill running down my spine. The conspiracy was deeper than I'd imagined, and I had a feeling that the worst was yet to come. Before we dive into the next part of this chilling discovery, I'd love to know you're still with me on this journey. Please drop a yes in the comments if you're ready to see how a father fights back. Also, a quick heads up. The following events contain dramatized elements for storytelling purposes. If this isn't for you, feel free to skip this video now. The silence in my study was heavy, the kind of silence that precedes a landslide. I stood before the open safe, my fingers trembling as they brushed the cold, empty velvet of the interior. This safe had held the bedrock of my life, the original partnership deeds of Harmon Maritime, the titles to our fleet, and the handwritten letters Margaret had left me before the world turned gray. Now it was a hollow ribcage, its heart torn out. I didn't hear her enter. I only smelled the faint, expensive scent of jasmine and something metallic like the edge of a knife. I moved some things to the cloud system, Edward. I thought it was for the best. I didn't turn around immediately. I needed a second to rearrange my face, to push the screaming rage back into the dark corners of my soul. When I finally pivoted, Diana was leaning against the mahogany doorframe. She looked ethereal in the soft afternoon light, a vision of domestic grace holding a porcelain cup of tea. But for the first time in 3 years, I didn't see a wife. I saw a scavenger. "The cloud?" I asked, my voice sounding like dry parchment. "Since when do we move private estate documents to a digital server without a board resolution?" Diana stepped into the room, her movements fluid and practiced. "Paper files are such a liability, Edward, especially now. With the shareholders becoming restless after yesterday's meeting, I wanted to ensure everything was encrypted and accessible only to us. You've always said adaptability is the key to survival." "Accessibility is one thing, Diana. Removal is another." I walked toward my desk, my eyes tracking her every move. Those documents were the history of this family. Margaret's original stock certificates were in there. She didn't flinch at the mention of my first wife. She simply took a sip of her tea, her eyes watching me over the rim. "Margaret's legacy is safe, Edward. I've had everything scanned into the Harmon Secure Vault. It's much more efficient. If something were to happen, a fire, a break-in, we wouldn't lose 40 years of work in an afternoon." "And who has the encryption keys?" I asked, leaning back against my desk, crossing my arms to hide the fact that my fists were clenched so tight my knuckles were white. "You and I," she said, softly approaching me. She placed the tea on the desk and reached out her hand, resting on my chest, right over my hammering heart. "Why are you so tense? You've been acting like a stranger since you got back from Galveston. Did something happen out there that you aren't telling me?" The audacity of the question nearly broke my composure. She was asking me if I was hiding something while she was keeping my dead son in a motel 50 miles away. "I'm just tired, Diana," I said, forcing a smile that felt like a scar. "Losing Vincent twice, once to the sea and again to a false lead today, it takes a toll. My mind isn't as sharp as it was 40 years ago." "That's why I'm here," she whispered, her fingers trailing up to my collar. "To be your strength. To carry the load while you rest. The board is pushing for a management contingency plan, Edward. They want to know that if you step aside, the company won't falter." I told them I would handle it. "I bet you did," I muttered. "What was that?" "I said I appreciate the loyalty." I gently moved her hand away. "I think I'll stay down here for a while. I have some digital organizing of my own to do." "Don't stay up too late," she said, her eyes lingering on the safe before she turned to leave. "I had Mrs. Patterson make that beef stew you like. It's in the warmer." I waited until I heard the click of her heels vanish up the grand staircase. The moment she was gone, I collapsed into my leather chair, the air rushing out of me in a jagged sob I refused to let escape. My house was a fortress occupied by the enemy. I pulled my laptop forward, but I didn't log into the company server. I knew Diana would be monitoring my traffic from the bedroom. Instead, I pulled a encrypted USB from a hidden compartment in my desk, a gift from Marcus Cole a year ago. I bypassed the Harmon network and tunneled into the Delaware Department of State's corporate records. My fingers flew across the keys, fueled by a cold surgical fury. "Coastal Edge Shipping LLC, I whispered into the empty room. The screen flickered. The company was registered 10 years ago. It had been a ghost, a shell used for minor logistics. But in the last 24 months, its activity had exploded. I looked at the registered directors. Daniel A. Crawford, a pseudonym. But the filing address was a P.O. box in Galveston. I dug into the shipping manifests, my eyes widening as I saw the betrayal laid bare. Coastal Edge hadn't been competing with Harmon Maritime. It had been bleeding it. 12 of our primary contracts clients I had wined and dined for decades had quietly shifted their surcharges and logistics fees to Coastal Edge accounts, and the person who had authorized those shifts, Diana Harmon, vice president, she hadn't just been helping me. She had been building a parallel empire using my resources, my ships, and my reputation. And Vincent, he was the shadow king of it all. My phone buzzed on the desk. A message from Marcus. "Edward, I've located the pharmacist. He's in Savannah. He confirmed that in 2017, a man matching Vincent's description paid him $50,000 to mislabel a shipment of digoxin intended for your home address. He's ready to sign an affidavit, but he's terrified. He says Vincent told him that people who talk end up like the fish in the Gulf. I closed my eyes. The digoxin, Margaret's heart medication. I looked at the oil painting of the Hudson River, the one that hid the empty safe. My son didn't just want my money. He wanted my soul. He had killed the only woman I ever truly loved, and now he was using the woman I had tried to love to finish the job. I stood up, walked to the window, and looked out at the dark Houston skyline. I was a man of 68, surrounded by ghosts and vipers, but they had forgotten one thing: I didn't build Harmon Maritime by being a victim. I built it by being the most dangerous man in the room. "I'm coming for you, Vincent," I whispered to the glass. "I'm coming for both of you." The night was a stifling shroud. I sat on the back porch of my River Oaks home, the glowing blue water of the swimming pool mocking the darkness in my heart. I had a glass of scotch in my hand, untouched. I didn't trust anything in this house anymore, not even the air I breathed. Then the phone in my pocket vibrated. A private number. I took a breath, centering myself. I was no longer Edward Harmon, the grieving father. I was Edward Harmon, the predator in the tall grass. I pressed the accept button. "Hello? Dad?" The voice was a haunting echo. It was deeper sandpaper rough, but the cadence was unmistakable. It was the voice that used to ask me for advice on his homework. The voice that had stood beside me at my wife's funeral. Hearing it now, knowing what I knew, felt like a slow-motion car crash. "Vincent," I made my voice break a perfect imitation of a man on the verge of a heart attack. "Vincent, is that my godson? Is it really you?" "It's me, Dad," he said. He sounded breathless, his voice laced with a theatrical urgency. "Listen to me, I don't have much time. I'm using a burner phone. I'm in trouble." "The bank, they called me," I stammered, leaning forward and resting my head in my hand. "I went to Galveston, Vincent. I looked for you. I thought I was going crazy. Where are you?" "Tell me where you are. I'll send the private jet. I'll call the FBI." No police, Dad. You can't." His voice sharpened, the old entitlement flickering through the facade. "The people who did this to me, they're watching everything. They're in the company. If the authorities get involved, I'm a dead man. Truly dead this time." "Who did this to you?" I asked, my eyes narrowing as I watched the reflection of the upstairs hallway light in the pool water. "Tell me their names." "I don't know yet," he lied, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "But I have proof of the embezzlement. I found out who was stealing from the North Atlantic accounts, and that's why they pushed me off that boat. I've been hiding in Mexico recovering. I just got back across the border 2 days ago." I marveled at the intricacy of his deceit. He was painting himself as the hero, the whistleblower who had been silenced. It was a brilliant move, if only he didn't know that I had already seen him through a motel window in Galveston. "What do you need, son? Anything. Just tell me." "I need to protect the assets, Dad," he said, his tone turning clinical. "They're going to move against you at the next board meeting. Diana, she told me the board is divided. If they freeze your personal accounts, we're finished. I need you to sign an emergency power of attorney. Just a temporary one, giving me the authority to move the reserve funds into a shielded escrow account." I almost laughed. The emergency power of attorney. It was the ultimate weapon. In Texas, a properly executed financial power of attorney could give him broad authority over my account's company shares and property documents. It would not make me legally incompetent by itself, but in Vincent's hands, it could become the first brick in a competency case against me. He wasn't just asking for money, he was asking for my life. I don't know, Vincent," I said, playing the role of the confused aging patriarch. "Gerald always told me never to sign anything without him reviewing it. He's very strict about—" "Gerald is part of this problem, Dad," Vincent barked, his patience fraying. "Don't you see? He's been your lawyer for 30 years. He knows where all the bodies are buried. He's the one who made the documents disappear. You can't trust him. You can only trust me, your own blood." "You're right," I whispered. "You're right. Gerald has been acting strange lately. He didn't even look at me during the meeting today." "Exactly," Vincent said, his voice smoothing out again, smelling victory. "I'll have a courier deliver the documents to the house tomorrow morning. Sign them, and I'll handle the rest. We'll take the company back together, Dad, like we always planned." "Together," I repeated. "I've missed you so much, Vincent. I thought I had lost everything." "I missed you too, Dad," he said. There was a brief pause, a moment where a real son might have felt a flicker of guilt, but Vincent only added, "I have to go. Someone's coming. I love you." The line went dead. I stared at the phone for a full minute, my heart cold as ice. "I love you." Those 3 words, once the most precious things he could say to me now, felt like a death threat. I immediately dialed Marcus Cole. "Did you get it?" I asked. "Every word, Edward," Marcus replied. He sounded grim. "I've been running the trace since the first 10 seconds. The call originated from a VoIP server, but the IP address is tethered to a residential Wi-Fi network in Galveston, the Seaside Inn." "No," Marcus said, and I could hear the sound of him typing. "It's a luxury high-rise called Bayou Court, Unit 412. I'm looking at the lease agreement now. It was signed 8 months ago. The tenant isn't Vincent Harmon." "Tell me," I said, though the answer was already burning in my mind. "The tenant is Diana Crawford, Diana's maiden name, the name she had stopped using after marrying me," Marcus said. "Your wife has been paying for a secret apartment for your son since before he even disappeared. Edward, they didn't just meet up yesterday. They've been living a double life right under your nose." I looked up at the master bedroom window. The light was still on. Diana was probably sitting there waiting for Vincent to text her that the old man had fallen for the bait. "They think I'm a fool, Marcus," I said, my voice dropping to a level of coldness that felt foreign even to me. "They think 40 years of building an empire has made me soft. They think they can use my son's voice to lead me to the slaughter." "What's the move, Edward?" "I'm going to sign that power of attorney," I said. "What are you, crazy? You'll lose everything." "I'm going to sign it," I repeated, a dark smile finally touching my lips. "But Gerald is going to make sure that the escrow account Vincent is so excited about is actually a trap that will create a clean electronic money trail for federal investigators the moment a single dollar enters it. And tomorrow morning, Marcus, you and I are going to visit Bayou Court." "I'll be there at 5 a.m., Marcus said. I hung up the phone and walked back into the house. As I passed the kitchen, I saw the bowl of beef stew Diana had left for me. I picked it up, walked to the trash can, and dumped it in. I wasn't hungry for stew. I was hungry for justice. As I climbed the stairs toward the bedroom I shared with a traitor, I felt a strange sense of peace. The grieving father was dead. The man who built Harmon Maritime was back, and he was very, very angry. The 5 a.m. Houston air was a thick, humid shroud that felt like breathing through a damp wool blanket. I stood in the deep shadows of my driveway in River Oaks, watching the flickering orange glow of the streetlights reflecting off the dew-slicked hood of my car. I was 68 years old, a billionaire by all accounts, yet I felt like a ghost haunting my own estate. When the matte black SUV pulled up, its headlights dimmed to a predatory glow, I moved with a quickness that surprised even me. I climbed into the passenger seat, and Marcus Cole didn't say a word. He didn't need to. He just shifted the gear into drive, and we glided away from the house where my wife lay sleeping, dreaming of my destruction. "You're holding that steering wheel like you want to snap it, Marcus," I said, my voice raspy from lack of sleep. "I don't like being played, Edward," Marcus replied, his eyes fixed on the dark stretch of I-45 South. "And I don't like it when people I work for get played. I spent all night digging through the digital trash. Bayou Court isn't just an apartment complex, it's a ghost nest. The lease for Unit 412 was signed 8 months ago, exactly 3 months before the yacht fire off the Florida coast. Under what name, I asked, though the bile in the back of my throat already gave me the answer. Diana Crawford, her maiden name. She used a dormant Social Security number associated with a deceased aunt in Arizona to bypass the standard background checks. The deposit was $50,000 in cash. No paper trail, no bank transfers. It was a clean surgical setup. I stared out at the passing marshlands of the Texas coast, the horizon beginning to bleed a sickly gray. She was building a lifeboat. She knew the yacht was going to burn before the fuel was even loaded. She wasn't just my wife. She was Vincent's logistics officer. We reached Galveston just as the sun began to peek over the Gulf of Mexico, turning the water into the color of a bruised plum. Bayou Court sat on the edge of the seawall, a glass and steel monstrosity that felt out of place among the weathered boardwalks. Marcus parked a block away behind an abandoned warehouse. He handed me a pair of military-grade binoculars. "Unit 412, top floor corner balcony. Look closely, Edward, and take your time." I adjusted the focus, my hands trembling. The curtains were partially drawn, but the morning light was enough to illuminate the figure stepping out onto the balcony. It was Vincent. He looked vibrant. He was wearing a gray cashmere robe. I recognized a gift I had given him for his 30th birthday. He was leaning against the railing, sipping coffee, looking out at the ocean with the serene confidence of a man who had already won. There were no scars, no signs of the trauma he had described on the phone. My son hadn't survived a tragedy. He had orchestrated a vacation. "He looks well for a dead man," I whispered, the words tasting like copper. Look at the man who just walked out behind him, Marcus commanded. A second man joined Vincent on the balcony. He was shorter, dressed in a sharp navy suit holding a tablet. I zoomed in until I could see the sweat on his forehead. It was Silas Vane. Vane, I spat the name. That snake. He's been a minority shareholder for 15 years. I practically funded his daughter's wedding. He's more than a shareholder now, Marcus said, his voice dropping to a low growl. He's the swing vote. If Diana has him, she has the board. But that's not the most important thing I found, Edward. We need to talk about Ryan Kowalski. I lowered the binoculars, my heart skipping a beat. Ryan, Vincent's roommate. He was a good kid. Quiet. Vincent said he went back to Phoenix after the graduation. He didn't go to Phoenix, Marcus said, sliding a tablet into my lap. On the screen was a forensic report and a grainy photograph of a young man with blonde hair and a familiar build. Ryan Kowalski worked for Harmon Maritime's logistics hub in Miami. He disappeared 3 days before the yacht fire. No police report was filed because Vincent told the staff Ryan had quit to join a startup in Europe. I looked at the forensics. What am I looking at, Marcus? The body the Coast Guard pulled from the wreckage, Marcus said, his voice as cold as the sea. The one you buried in the family plot, it was burned beyond recognition, but the height, weight, and general skeletal structure were a perfect match for your son. The dental records were the deciding factor, but I found the dentist Edward, Dr. Eris Thorne. He received a $300,000 wire transfer from a shell company in the Caymans 2 weeks after the funeral. Then he closed his office and vanished. The realization hit me like a physical blow. I felt the air leave my lungs. He didn't just fake his death. He needed a body to make the insurance claim and the inheritance process move without a hitch. He chose Ryan. He chose the one person who trusted him, the one person who had no family to ask questions. Vincent didn't just kill his friend, Marcus added. He used him as a prop. To the world, Vincent Harmon is dead. To the law, he's a tragic victim. And to you, he's a ghost you'd give anything to bring back. He played on your grief to keep you from looking too closely at the numbers. I looked back at the balcony. Vincent was laughing now, clapping Silas Vane on the back. It was a sound I could almost hear through the glass, a sound of pure, unadulterated arrogance. I thought about the 30 years I spent teaching him the business, telling him that a man's word is his bond, that loyalty is the only currency that matters. I had raised a monster in my own image, only I had forgotten to give him a soul. He thinks he's invisible, I said, my voice turning into a whisper of pure steel. He thinks because he's dead, he can't be touched. What do you want to do? Marcus asked. We can call the Galveston PD right now. We have enough to detain them. No, I said, handing back the binoculars. If we call the police now, Vincent will claim he was kidnapped or coerced. He'll find a way to wiggle out. I want him to walk into the trap he built for me. I want him to think he's won everything, and then I want to watch the floor drop out from under him. And Diana is the key, I said. She's the one who signs the papers. She's the one who has to face me every night at dinner. Drive us back to Houston, Marcus. I have a meeting with Gerald. It's time to see just how much of my company I still own. As we sped away from the Bayou Court, the sun finally broke fully over the horizon, casting long, jagged shadows across the road. I wasn't just a father anymore. I was a man who had lost his wife, his son, and his legacy in the span of 72 hours. But as I watched the Houston skyline rise in the distance, I felt a strange, cold clarity. They had taken everything from me, but they had forgotten one thing: I was the one who built the empire they were trying to steal. And I knew every secret passageway, every hidden trapdoor, and every way to burn it all down if I had to. The offices of Whitmore and Associates were silent, the early morning sun cutting through the blinds of Gerald's corner suite like golden bars. Gerald didn't look like the shark of a lawyer I'd known for 30 years. He looked like a man who had seen the end of the world and was just waiting for the dust to settle. He had 3 empty espresso cups on his desk and a pile of documents that looked like they had been wrestled from a fire. You look like hell, Edward, Gerald said, not looking up from a ledger. I've spent the morning looking at a dead man, I replied, sitting heavily in the leather guest chair. Give me the damage report, Gerald, and don't sugarcoat it. I don't have the stomach for it today. Gerald sighed and slid a blue-bound folder across the mahogany. The board meeting on Monday. When you left to take that call from the bank, Diana didn't just continue the meeting, she pivoted. She had Silas Vane and 4 other minority shareholders primed and ready. They invoked Article 7, Section 4 of the Harmon Maritime bylaws. I felt a cold prickle at the back of my neck. The sudden incapacity clause. Precisely, Gerald said, tapping the document. Diana presented a pre-signed affidavit from a private physician, someone we've never heard of, suggesting that your grief over Vincent was manifesting as cognitive decline and erratic decision-making. Leaving the most important meeting of the year to chase a phone call from a motel, she used that as the final proof. She argued that the Savannah expansion and the North Atlantic merger couldn't be left in the hands of a man who was unraveling. And they bought it, I asked, my voice dangerously low. Men I've made millionaires sat there and voted to strip me of my power based on a 5-minute exit. They didn't just buy it, Edward. They were paid to buy it, Gerald said. Silas Vane has been promised the chairmanship of the new logistics subsidiary. The others were offered guaranteed buyouts at 20% above market value once the merger with Coastal Edge is finalized. Coastal Edge, I muttered. The shell company Vincent's been using to bleed us dry. It's not a shell anymore, Gerald corrected. On paper, it's a legitimate logistics firm registered in Delaware. And according to the resolution passed on Monday, Harmon Maritime is entering into a strategic partnership that essentially transfers all operational control to Coastal Edge. As of 10 a.m. yesterday, Diana is the acting CEO. You, Edward, have been moved to Chairman Emeritus, a title with no voting rights, no executive authority, and no access to the primary treasury. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city I had helped build. Harmon Maritime wasn't just a company, it was my life's blood. To be told I was a guest in my own house was a humiliation I couldn't describe. They did this in 72 hours, I said. How is that legally possible without a contest period? That's where they were clever, Gerald explained. Because it was filed under the incapacity clause, the 72-hour period doesn't apply to the transfer of power, only to the permanent removal. They've essentially put you in a legal coma. You're still the owner on paper, but Diana has the emergency power of attorney to act on your behalf until a formal competency hearing can be held. A competency hearing, I turned to face him. They want to put me in a sanitarium. I found the draft for the petition in the digital files Marcus intercepted, Gerald said, his voice grim. They've already scouted a private facility in Austin. High security, very discreet. If you sign the documents Vincent's courier is bringing today, you're basically confirming your own incapacity. You won't be signing away your rights completely, but you'll be giving them the document they need to argue that you trusted Vincent with your affairs while your judgment was declining. I leaned over the desk, my face inches from Gerald's. What's our play, Gerald? I didn't come here to hear a eulogy for my career. Gerald's eyes sharpened. We have one window. Under Delaware General Corporation law, a board of directors resolution can be overturned if it was achieved through material fraud or coercion. We have to prove that the incapacity was manufactured. But more importantly, we have to prove that the strategic partner, Coastal Edge, is an entity controlled by a person who is committing identity theft and insurance fraud. Vincent, I said. If we can prove Vincent Harmon is alive and acting as the shadow director of Coastal Edge, the entire merger becomes a criminal conspiracy. The board's vote becomes vulnerable to an emergency injunction, forensic review, and possible rescission because it was based on fraudulent information. But we need a smoking gun, Edward. We need more than a photo from a balcony. I have the pharmacist in Savannah, I said, and I have the recording from Marcus. What else do we need? We need the money trail, Gerald said. We need to show that the funds used to start Coastal Edge were embezzled from Harmon Maritime. I've started a forensic audit, but Diana has blocked my access to the main server. She's claiming executive privilege over the financial logs. She can't block me, I said, a cold smile forming on my lips. I have a physical backup key in the vault at the house, the one she thinks is empty. Edward, if you go back into that house and start poking around, they'll know, Gerald warned. Vincent is already on his way there. If he thinks you're on to him, this stops being a corporate battle and starts being a survival situation. It's been a survival since the moment they killed Margaret, I said, grabbing my jacket. I've spent 40 years playing by the rules of the board. It's time I started playing by the rules of the sea. You get the FBI ready, Gerald. Tell them I have a federal case that's going to blow the shipping industry wide open. But tell them to stay back until I give the signal. What's the signal? The moment I sign that power of attorney, I said, because the second I sign it, they'll think they've won. And that's exactly when I'm going to take everything back. As I walked out of Gerald's office, the weight of the betrayal felt lighter, replaced by the heavy, solid certainty of a plan. I wasn't just a father, and I wasn't just a businessman. I was a man with nothing left to lose, and that made me the most dangerous person in Houston. I pulled the sedan into the circular driveway of my River Oaks estate, the tires crunching on the gravel with a sound that felt like grinding bone. Marcus was parked a block away, his presence a silent promise of backup, but for now I was alone. I looked at the grand limestone facade of my home, a house I had built to be a sanctuary for Margaret and Vincent. Now it was a stage for a grand macabre play. As I pushed open the heavy oak front doors, the scent of expensive lilies and floor wax greeted me, the smell of a life that was no longer mine. "Edward, is that you?" Diana's voice drifted from the grand living room, sounding breathless and unnaturally high. I walked toward the sound, my heart a cold stone in my chest. Standing in the center of the room, framed by the afternoon sun streaming through the arched windows, was the ghost I had seen in Galveston, Vincent. He was no longer wearing the gray robe. He was dressed in a crisp white linen shirt and dark slacks, looking every bit the prodigal son returned from the abyss. "Dad," he said. The word was a dagger. He moved toward me, his arms open, a look of profound, staged relief on his face. I didn't move. I let him embrace me. His body was warm, solid, and smelled of the same sandalwood aftershave he had used for years. It was the hug of a murderer, the embrace of a man who had watched his best friend burn so he could inherit a throne. "Vincent," I choked out, forcing my voice to tremble with the appropriate amount of shock and joy. "My God, I thought we had a funeral son. We buried you." "I know, Dad. I'm so sorry." He pulled back his hands, gripping my shoulders. His eyes were moist. God, he was good. He had Margaret's eyes, but there was a void behind them that I had been too blind to see for 30 years. I was in Veracruz. A fishing boat picked me up. I didn't know who I was for months. It was only when I saw a newspaper with the Harmon Maritime logo that it all started coming back. Diana stood beside him, her hand tucked into the crook of his arm, her eyes red as if she had been weeping for hours. "It's a miracle, Edward. A literal miracle. He arrived just an hour ago. I was so shocked I nearly fainted." I looked at her, then at him. The two people I had trusted most in the world were standing before me, weaving a tapestry of lies so thick I wondered how I hadn't suffocated on them years ago. "Veracruz," I repeated, walking to the bar and pouring myself a double scotch with a hand that I allowed to shake. "The Coast Guard searched every inch of that coastline. How did they miss you?" "I was far out, Dad. The currents," Vincent said, sitting on the edge of the leather sofa. He looked perfectly at home, as if he hadn't been hiding in a secret apartment in Galveston for 8 months. "But I don't want to talk about the darkness. I'm home now. I want to help you. Diana told me about the board, about the stress you've been under." "She told you a lot then," I said, taking a sip of the scotch. I felt the burn in my throat, a welcome distraction. "She told me everything," Vincent said, his tone turning serious, the professional mask sliding into place. "She told me you were struggling to keep the board in line, that Silas Vane is making a move. Dad, you don't have to fight them alone anymore. We can fix this tonight." "Tonight?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "I have the paperwork," Vincent said, gesturing to a sleek leather portfolio on the coffee table. "The emergency power of attorney. If you sign it, I can step in as your legal proxy. I can bypass the board's restrictions and move the reserve funds into a protected account before Silas can freeze them. We can save the company, Dad, just like we used to talk about." I looked at the portfolio. It was sitting there like a coiled viper. "I need to read it, Vincent. You know how I am with contracts. Gerald taught me." "Gerald is a relic, Dad," Vincent interrupted, his voice sharpening for a fraction of a second before he softened it again. "He's the one who let Silas get this far. Trust your son. Trust your family." "I do," I said, looking him in the eye. "I trust you more than anyone." We spent the next hour in a surreal dance of catching up. Vincent told stories of his missing months, details about Mexican clinics and nameless doctors that Marcus would surely debunk within hours. I watched the way he and Diana exchanged glances, small, imperceptible nods of confirmation. They were so confident, so sure that the old man had been broken by grief that he would believe anything. "I've asked Mrs. Patterson to take the evening off," Diana said, standing up. "I thought we should have a private family dinner, just the three of us, to celebrate." "A family dinner," I said, a cold smile touching my lips. "That sounds perfect. It's been far too long since we sat at the table together." "I'll go help in the kitchen," Diana said, leaning down to kiss my cheek. Her lips were cold. As she left the room, Vincent turned to me. "I'm glad you're taking this well, Dad. I was worried the shock might be too much for your heart." "My heart is stronger than people think, Vincent," I said, leaning back in my chair. "It's endured a lot. It can endure a little more." I looked at my phone on the coffee table. The recording app was running, capturing every word of his fabricated survival story. As Vincent started talking about the future of Harmon Maritime, his vision for the merger with Coastal Edge, I felt a profound sense of detachment. I was no longer a father listening to his son. I was a judge listening to a confession. And the sentence was already written. The dining room of this Harmon estate was a mausoleum of gold and mahogany, illuminated by the cold, flickering light of a crystal chandelier that had once been the centerpiece of Margaret's pride. Tonight, the air was different. It didn't smell of home, it smelled of ozone and expensive wine, the kind of atmosphere that precedes a lightning strike. Diana had outdone herself. The table was set with the Savers porcelain and the vintage baccarat crystal, the silver cutlery polished, until it reflected my face like a distorted funhouse mirror. "Everything is ready," Diana said, her voice a silk ribbon that barely concealed the tremor in her hands. She stood at the head of the table wearing a dark velvet dress that swallowed the light, a celebration for the return of the king. Vincent sat to my right, looking every bit the heir apparent. He had changed into a dark suit, his hair slicked back, his posture radiating a predatory grace. "Not a King Diana," he said, his voice smooth as aged bourbon. "Just a son who's glad to be back in his father's house." I took my seat at the head of the table, the heavy oak chair feeling like a throne in a kingdom of ash. I looked at the bottle of 1982 Chateau Lafite, breathing in the decanter a wine I had bought the year Vincent was born. It was supposed to be opened for a wedding or perhaps the birth of a grandson. Instead, it was being served as an accompaniment to a betrayal. "To being home," Vincent said, raising his glass. "To the truth." I added, my voice steady, my eyes locked on his, wherever it may be hiding. We clinked glasses, the ring of the crystal echoing through the silent house. I watched Vincent take a deep, appreciative swallow. I merely brought the rim to my lips, letting the bouquet of dark fruit and cedar fill my senses before setting it back down. The first course was the chilled lobster bisque, but I could barely taste it. Every sound in the room was amplified, the scrape of a spoon against porcelain, the soft hiss of the air conditioning, the rhythmic thumping of my own heart. I watched them. Diana was playing the part of the devoted, relieved wife to perfection, but she couldn't stop her eyes from darting toward me every time I touched my glass. And Vincent was a masterclass in sociopathic charm. He told stories of the fishing village in Mexico, describing the salt air and the kindness of strangers with a level of detail that would have been moving if I didn't know it was a fabrication woven from the threads of a secret life in Galveston. "You're not eating much, Edward," Diana noted, her fork pausing halfway to her mouth. "Is the bisque not to your liking? I had the chef prepare it exactly the way you usually prefer." "The appetite of a man my age is a fickle thing, Diana," I replied, leaning back. "Perhaps I'm just full on the shock of the day. It's not every Tuesday your son rises from the dead." Vincent laughed, a sound that was far too bright for the darkness in his eyes. "I'm sorry for the shock, Dad, but once you sign those papers tomorrow, the stress will evaporate. We'll be a team again. The board won't know what hit them." Halfway through the main course, a beef tenderloin that looked like a slab of raw grief, Vincent stood up. "I forgot the sourdough rolls in the warmer. Mrs. Patterson usually leaves them there. I'll be right back." He walked toward the kitchen with an easy, rhythmic stride. I stayed focused on my plate, but my entire being was attuned to his movement. In the center of the table sat a silver gravy boat polished to a mirror finish by a maid who probably didn't know she was documenting a crime. As Vincent passed behind my chair, I watched his reflection in the curved silver surface. He didn't stop. He didn't even break his stride. But his right hand, made a flicking motion over my glass. A tiny white speck, no larger than a grain of salt, tumbled through the air and vanished into the deep crimson heart of my wine. My blood went cold, a physical sensation like ice water being injected into my veins. He had done it. My son, the boy I had held in the hospital when he was seconds old, had just dropped a chemical death warrant into my drink. He didn't know that I had spent 40 years reading the subtle tells of men who tried to cheat me. He didn't know that the silver he had bought with my money was now testifying against him. Vincent returned with the basket of warm rolls, his smile as wide and hollow as a grave. "Here we go. Still hot." "Thank you, son," I said. The word son felt like broken glass in my mouth. I picked up the wine glass. I could feel the weight of their gaze on me, 4 eyes hungry and sharp, waiting for the liquid to cross my lips. I swirled the wine slowly, watching the legs crawl down the sides of the crystal. It looked beautiful. It looked lethal. "You know, Vincent," I said, staring into the red depths, "I was thinking about your mother's final days today. She was so tired toward the end. Her heart just couldn't keep the pace. The doctors were baffled, weren't they?" The air in the room seemed to vanish. Vincent's grip on his steak knife tightened until his knuckles turned as white as the pill he'd just dropped. "It was a tragedy, Dad. We've discussed this. Her heart was weak." "Was it," I asked, my voice dropping to a whisper of pure steel, Or was she just given something that made it appear weak, something that left no trace but a quiet, convenient stop? Diana dropped her fork. The clatter on the porcelain sounded like a gunshot. Edward, please. This is supposed to be a celebration. Why are you bringing up such painful memories now? Because memories are all I have left, Diana, I said. I brought the glass toward my face, the scent of the wine mixing with the metallic tang of fear emanating from across the table. I could feel the heat of Vincent's anticipation. He wanted me to drink. He needed me to be incapacitated to be the senile old man who could be ushered into a sanitarium or a coffin, whichever was more efficient. I let the rim touch my lower lip. I could taste the coldness of the crystal. I waited for 5 agonizing seconds, watching the flicker of triumph in Vincent's eyes. Then I set the glass back down, perfectly centered on its coaster. Actually, I said, a thin, cold smile touching my lips. I think I've had quite enough. My stomach is in knots. I suppose the miracle of the day is a bit heavy for an old man's digestion. The disappointment that flashed across Vincent's face was almost comical. It was the look of a child who had been promised a toy only to have it snatched away. Dad, you should at least finish your wine. It's a 82 Lafite. It's a waste to let it sit. Wine can be replaced, Vincent, I said, pushing my chair back. The screech of the wood against the marble floor was the only honest sound in the room. Time, however, cannot. I'm going to bed. I have a long day of paperwork tomorrow. I stood up, my legs feeling solid, my mind sharper than it had been in years. I looked at Diana. She was white as a sheet, her eyes darting between me and the untouched glass of poisoned wine. She knew. She was the accomplice who didn't have the stomach for the kill, but she was still holding the knife. Good night, Vincent, I said, walking toward the grand staircase. Rest well. You'll need your energy for the final stage. I didn't look back. I climbed the stairs with a slow, deliberate pace, every step a heartbeat of a man who had just escaped a trap. When I reached the safety of my study, I locked the door and leaned against it, my breath coming in ragged, jagged gasps. I pulled my phone from my pocket and dialed Marcus. I have it, I whispered into the receiver. The silver reflection caught everything. He dropped the pill. The glass is still on the table untouched. I need you to get a forensics team ready to test it the moment we move. Are you safe, Edward? Marcus's voice was a low, urgent growl. Safe, no, I said, looking out at the dark Houston night. But for the first time in 8 years, I am awake. Tell Gerald to move the filing to 8 a.m., and Marcus, tell the FBI agents to be at the gates by dawn. My son wants a kingdom. I'm going to give him a cell. I walked to the window and looked down at the driveway. The courier was waiting by the gates, oblivious to the fact that the man he was serving was currently dismantling the lives of the people who hired him. I looked at my hands. They were steady. The father was gone. Only the chairman remained. The sun rose over Houston on Thursday morning with a violent blood-orange hue, as if the sky itself was aware of the reckoning that was about to take place. I had slipped out of the house at 5 a.m., leaving a note for Diana claiming I had an early breakfast meeting with an old investor. In reality, I was sitting in the back of Marcus's SUV watching the gates of my estate disappear in the rearview mirror. For 48 hours, I had played the part of the dying king. Now, I was the executioner. By 6 a.m., I was in Gerald Whitmore's office. The smell of burnt coffee and old paper was a comfort compared to the suffocating jasmine of my own home. Gerald was already there, his tie loosened, surrounded by 3 agents from the FBI's white-collar crime division. The clock is ticking, Edward, Gerald said, sliding a thick blue folder toward me. We filed the injunction against the board resolution at exactly 8:01 a.m. Under Delaware law, since you've contested the incapacity claim with a certified clean bill of health from a neutral third-party physician, the transfer of power to Diana is frozen for investigation. She has no authority to move a single cent. That's only half of it, Marcus added, stepping forward from the shadows of the corner. He placed a sleek tablet on the desk. The DNA results came back from the lab in Florida 2 hours ago. We compared the samples recovered from the yacht wreckage with the medical records we pulled for Ryan Kowalski. It's a 99.9% match, Edward. The body you buried 6 months ago wasn't your son. It was Ryan. I stared at the screen. The cold, hard data was the final nail in the coffin of my denial. Vincent hadn't just faked a tragedy. He had committed a calculated, cold-blooded murder to pave his way to my throne. And the wine? The senior FBI agent asked, leaning forward. The bottle of Lafite and the glass are in your possession now, I replied. But I have something better. I pulled out my phone and played the video Marcus had processed from the silver gravy boat reflection. In the grainy, distorted image, Vincent's hand was clear as day. The flick of the wrist, the white pill falling, the silent intention. The agent nodded, his face grim. Attempted murder by poisoning, identity theft, insurance fraud, and now a very strong circumstantial case for the homicide of Ryan Kowalski. Mr. Harmon, we have enough to move. Wait, I said, my voice like iron. There's one more thing, the pharmacist in Savannah. He's in a safe house 10 minutes from here, Marcus confirmed. He's signed the affidavit. He's ready to testify that Vincent Harmon paid him to tamper with your wife's heart medication 8 years ago. He kept the ledger a private record of every special transaction. Vincent was arrogant enough to think a small-town pharmacist wouldn't keep receipts. The room went silent. The weight of 8 years of guilt I had carried like a lead weight finally began to lift, replaced by a white-hot fury that threatened to consume me. Margaret didn't die because I was too busy. She didn't die because of a mistake. She was murdered by the son she loved more than her own life, because she dared to protect the company from his greed. I spent 8 years blaming myself, I whispered. I looked at the agent. I want him to know. I want him to know that I know everything before you take him. We move in 2 hours, the agent said. We'll be at the gates by noon. We need you to go back, Edward. We need you to keep them there. If Vincent suspects we're coming, he'll disappear again, and this time we might never find him. I stood up, adjusting my suit jacket. I felt 40 years of business experience settling into my bones. I had closed deals that changed the face of the shipping industry. I had faced down pirates in the Gulf and union strikes in the Atlantic. But this, the dismantling of my own blood, was the only deal that truly mattered. Edward, Gerald set his hand on my arm as I moved toward the door. Are you sure you can do this? Once we cross this line, there is no going back. The Harmon name will be dragged through every tabloid in the country. The Harmon name died when Vincent dropped that pill in the wine, Gerald, I said. I'm not saving a name. I'm seeking justice for a woman who was too good for this world. I walked out of the office and into the bright Houston sun. The city was waking up, oblivious to the fact that the legend of Edward Harmon was about to end in a storm of federal sirens and broken glass. I got back into Marcus's car. Let's go home, Marcus, I said. I have one last dinner guest to entertain. The house was eerily quiet when I returned. The air felt thin, charged with the static of an impending thunderstorm. I found Diana in the living room, sitting by the window. She wasn't holding a teacup today. She was holding a stack of documents, her face as pale as the marble floor beneath her feet. Edward, she said, her voice a fragile whisper, we need to talk. I walked to the bar, pouring myself a glass of water. I thought we did all our talking at dinner last night, Diana, or did Vincent have more paperwork for me to sign? She didn't answer. Instead, she pushed the documents toward me. Her hands were shaking so violently that the papers slid across the table like falling leaves. I picked them up. It was a folder from Vincent's private laptop, the one he had left in the study while he went out to check on a few things this morning. Inside were digital copies of photos, messages, and bank transfers. But they weren't about me. They were about Diana. He was going to burn me, Edward, she said, a sob breaking through her voice. He was setting me up to take the fall for everything. The embezzlement, the Coastal Edge shell companies. He even fabricated evidence of me having an affair with Silas Vane. There's a predated letter in here addressed to the board claiming that I manipulated him into faking his death so I could seize control. I looked through the files. Vincent was thorough. He had created a narrative where Diana was the mastermind and he was the victimized son, forced into hiding by a manipulative stepmother. He had even drafted a petition for the guardianship of the unborn child, citing Diana's moral instability as a reason to take the baby away the moment it was born. He never loved me, she said, her eyes filling with tears of pure bitter realization. I was just a tool, a way to get into your house, into your bed, and into your safe. And once the baby was born, once he had a legal heir that he could control, I was going to be disposed of, just like Margaret. I sat across from her, watching the woman who had been a weapon aimed at my heart for 3 years crumble into nothing. I felt no pity, only a grim clinical satisfaction. How long have you known him, Diana? I asked. 5 years, she choked out. We met at a maritime conference in Miami. He told me you were a tyrant. He told me you had destroyed his mother's spirit and that he was the only one who could save the company. He promised me a life where we would be equals. I believed him because I wanted to believe him. And the baby, she looked down at her stomach, her hand trembling. It's his Edward. It was never yours. We planned the pregnancy to coincide with his disappearance to ensure your emotional vulnerability. He knew you wouldn't question the paternity because of your secret. My infertility. I said the words no longer holding any power over me. He knew that my pride would keep me silent. He used my own shame as a cage for me. He's a monster, Edward, she said, grabbing my hand. Her skin was ice cold. He's coming back here in 20 minutes. He went to the bank to check on the escrow account. When he finds out it's frozen, he'll come back here with blood in his eyes. You have to help me. I can tell you everything. I have every password, every offshore account number. I can be your witness." I pulled my hand away slowly and deliberately. "You're not doing this because you're sorry, Diana. You're doing this because you're the next one on his list." "Does it matter why?" she screamed, her voice cracking. "I can end him. I can give you the evidence to put him away for life." "I already have it," I said, standing up and looking out the window. Down the long, winding driveway, I saw the black SUVs of the FBI turning into the estate. "But your confession will be the final piece of the puzzle. If you want to save yourself from a life sentence, you'll sit in that chair, you'll stay quiet, and you'll tell those agents every word of the truth." "The FBI?" she gasped, her eyes widening as she saw the vehicles. "They're here for Vincent," I said. "And depending on what you say in the next hour, they'll be here for you too." Just as the first SUV pulled up to the front door, the back entrance to the living room opened. Vincent stepped in, his face flushed with rage, his expensive suit rumpled. He didn't see the agents outside yet, he only saw me and Diana. "The account is frozen," he roared, slamming his phone onto the coffee table. "Edward, what did you do? Why is the reserve fund under a federal hold?" The mask was gone. The prodigal son had vanished, leaving behind the cold, calculating killer I had seen through the motel window. I looked at him, and for the first time in my life, I didn't see my son. I saw the man who killed Margaret. "The game is over, Vincent," I said, my voice echoing in the sudden silence of the room. "And you've lost everything." The front door slammed shut behind Vincent, the sound echoing through the vaulted ceiling like a gunshot. He didn't see the black SUVs circling the perimeter. He didn't see the agents taking positions behind the limestone pillars of the veranda. His eyes were fixed on the coffee table on the phone that had just delivered the news of his financial ruin. "The account is frozen, Edward," he roared, his face contorted into a mask of feline rage. He strode into the center of the living room, ignoring Diana, who was trembling in the armchair. "I went to the bank to verify the transfer, and the manager treated me like a criminal. He said the funds are under a federal red flag hold. What the hell did you do?" I stood by the fireplace, my hand resting on the cold marble mantel. I looked at him. Really looked at him. The expensive suit, the manicured hair, the predatory gleam in his eyes. He looked like me. That was the most painful realization of all. "The game is over, Vincent," I said. My voice was quiet, steady, carrying the weight of 40 years of command. "And the mask has fallen." Vincent froze. He looked at me, then at Diana, whose face was streaked with tears and terror. A slow, dark smile crept across his lips, the smile of a man who realized the bluff had failed, but still believed he held the winning hand. "Well," he said, his voice dropping to a conversational, chilling tone, "this is inconvenient. I thought we could do this the easy way, Dad. I thought you'd sign the papers, go to the retreat in Austin, and live out your days in comfort. Why did you have to make it so complicated?" "Complicated?" I stepped toward him. "You killed your mother, Vincent. You killed Ryan Kowalski. You tried to poison me at my own dinner table. And you call this complicated?" "Anishish." Vincent laughed, a dry, rattling sound. "I didn't kill Margaret. I just accelerated the inevitable. She was going to take the company away from me. She was going to give it to a charity for homeless children. Can you imagine all that work, all that legacy wasted on people who don't know the difference between a barge and a tanker? I saved your life's work, Edward. You should be thanking me." "You murdered her." I whispered the words, feeling like broken glass. "And I spent 8 years blaming myself for her heart failure. I spent 8 years thinking I was the reason she died alone." "You were the reason," Vincent snapped, his eyes flashing. "You taught me that everything has a price. You taught me that the office always comes first. I watched you look through her like she was a piece of furniture for 30 years. I just applied the lessons you gave me, Dad. I just didn't stop where you did. I had the courage to do what was necessary to protect the empire." The silence that followed was absolute. I looked at my son and saw a mirror of my own coldness, my own ambition stripped of all humanity. I had built a monster, and then I had fed it my own family. "Vincent," I said, "put the phone down. The FBI is outside. Marcus is with them. It's over." Vincent didn't panic. Instead, he reached into the small of his back and pulled out a compact black semi-automatic pistol. Diana let out a strangled scream and dove behind the sofa. Vincent pointed the weapon at my chest, his hand as steady as a surgeon's. "The will is already changed, Dad. The board has already voted. If you die right now, Diana inherits everything. And since I'm the father of her child, I control her. It's a clean sweep. A tragedy at the Harmon estate. A grieving son returns only for his father to take his own life in a fit of senile despair. It's a perfect headline." "You won't do it," I said, though I wasn't sure. You need me to authorize the Cayman's transfer. Without my signature on the physical ledger, that money stays locked forever. I don't need the Caymans, Vincent said, his finger tightening on the trigger. I have Coastal Edge. I have the board. I have time. You're just a ghost, Edward. It's time you joined the others. From outside, the sound of a megaphone cut through the air. Vincent Harmon, this is the FBI. We have the house surrounded. Drop your weapon and come out with your hands up. Vincent's eyes flickered to the window for a fraction of a second. That was all the opening Diana needed. She lunged forward from behind the sofa, grabbing his arm with the desperate strength of a woman fighting for her life. Crack! The gunshot deafened me. I felt the heat of the bullet as it whizzed past my ear, shattering a vase of lilies behind me. Vincent shoved Diana away, her body hitting the floor with a sickening thud. He raised the gun again, focusing on me. Goodbye, Dad, he whispered. The front doors didn't just open, they disintegrated. Marcus Cole led the breach, a flashbang grenade blinding the room in a white-hot light. I was tackled to the floor by 2 agents as the room filled with the rhythmic shouting of tactical teams. Drop it now. Through the smoke and the ringing in my ears, I saw Vincent. He was standing in the center of the room, the gun still in his hand, but he was staring at Marcus. For a moment, I thought he would fire. Then the cold calculation returned to his eyes. He dropped the weapon and raised his hands, a smirk still playing on his lips. Careful, agents, Vincent said as they slammed him onto the marble floor. I'm a victim here. I was kidnapped in Mexico, remember? As they dragged him out in handcuffs, he passed me. He didn't look ashamed. He didn't look afraid. He looked at me with a pure, concentrated hatred that chilled me to the bone. I'm still your son, Edward, he hissed. And everything I am, I got from you. I watched them take him away. I watched Marcus help Diana up. I watched the forensic teams begin to bag the wine glass and the documents. I felt nothing. No triumph. No relief. Just a hollow, aching coldness where a family used to be. The Atlantic Ocean was a restless, churning gray as I stood on the porch of the small cottage in Cape Cod. It was October 2025. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of salt and dying leaves. This was where Margaret and I had spent our honeymoon 40 years ago, before the ships, before the boardrooms, before the poison. The legal fallout in Houston had been a tectonic shift. Vincent was currently awaiting trial in a federal high-security facility. The charges against him: first-degree murder of Ryan Kowalski, attempted murder of myself, and Diana. Identity theft and insurance fraud carried enough weight to ensure he would never see the sun outside of a prison yard again. He had tried to plead insanity, then tried to blame Diana, but the evidence Marcus and Gerald had gathered was an iron cage. Diana had cooperated fully. Her testimony, combined with the digital files Vincent had used to blackmail her, earned her a plea deal. She was not prosecuted for the embezzlement, provided she forfeited all claims to the Harmon estate. She had given birth to a boy in July. I had seen a photo of him once. He had Vincent's eyes. I had set up a blind trust for the child, enough to ensure he would be educated and cared for, but I had refused to see him. Some cycles needed to be broken. Gerald called me once a week. The sale of Harmon Maritime is finalized, Edward. The Danish conglomerate signed the closing papers yesterday. You are officially retired. And the proceeds, I asked. As per your instructions, Gerald said. 80% has been transferred to the Margaret Harmon Foundation. The first 3 shelters for victims of domestic violence opened in Houston and Miami this morning. The rest is being used to settle the Kowalski family's civil claim. Ryan's aunt in Phoenix. She cried when I told her. Good, I said. Let it be done. I sat in a wooden Adirondack chair, a wool blanket draped over my knees. My hands, once so busy at the helm of an empire, were now still. I had spent 40 years building a legacy of steel, thinking that the size of my fleet was the measure of my worth. I had been wrong. I had built a monument to my own vanity, and it had cost me the lives of the people I was supposed to protect. I thought about Margaret every day. I thought about the letter she had written, the one she died trying to protect me with. I realized now that she hadn't just been protecting the company. She had been trying to protect the version of me that she loved, the man I was before the greed took over. Marcus Cole visited me last month. He didn't say much. He just sat on the porch with me and watched the tide come in. Before he left, he asked, "Do you regret it, Edward? Any of it?" I looked at the waves, the same waves that had supposedly swallowed my son. I regret the man I became to build it, I said. I regret that I made it so easy for Vincent to believe that people were just assets to be moved on a ledger. Now there was nothing left to hide behind. No corporate titles, no private jets, no multi-million-dollar deals. Just an old man in a small house by the sea. I picked up a book from the side table, a worn copy of poetry Margaret used to read to me. I looked out at the horizon where the sea met the sky in an infinite blurring line. For the first time in my life, I wasn't looking for a ship. I wasn't waiting for a call. I breathed in the salt air, cold and clean. The Harmon Empire was gone. The name was a footnote in a criminal trial. But as I watched the sun begin to set over the Atlantic, I felt a strange, quiet peace. The ships had all sailed, the boardroom was empty. And for the first time in 40 years, I knew exactly who I was. I was just Edward, and that was finally enough. Standing amidst the ruins of an empire, I realized that wealth can never fill the emptiness of the soul. God gave me the wisdom to build a career, but I used it to build a wall separating myself from those I loved most. This saga of family betrayal revenge is not just about the treachery of Vincent or Diana. It is about my own betrayal of myself and my family. Looking back at my journey from the early days of starting out to facing bitter family Reddit stories, I have one message. Don't be like me. Don't let ambition turn you into a soulless machine only to find yourself alone with haunting regrets. Money can be remade, but trust and peace once lost cannot be bought with all the gold in the world. This is a classic case of family betrayal revenge where the victor is also the most pathetic loser. In my view, a true man is not measured by the number of ships he owns, but by the sense of security in the eyes of his wife and children. Family Reddit stories often end in retribution, but the price of loneliness is the steepest of all. Do not let hatred guide your path toward cruel family betrayal revenge, for in the end, hate only leaves behind ashes. Cherish the present before it turns into another sad set of family Reddit stories on social media. The following stories may contain fictionalized details for educational and moral purposes. If you find this content unsuitable, please stop here and choose a more appropriate topic.